some did not. The flow of knowledge was always there, and the Vedic line of thought is the forerunner. It is the first. It is the oldest. It's the most ancient. It's been in existence, and these thoughts have flowed out of the geographical area of India to various parts long, long ago. Today, we see that it finds a need and it has scientific relevance and has been aggressively researched upon, not that it's gone unresearched. Heaps and heaps of research is going on. Lot of research, and the outcome is, fortunately or unfortunately, you take one herb, this is ginger, for example, you do a lot of research on the chemical constituents of ginger and you identify the therapeutic values of each and every molecule. Ginger may have 25 active molecules. So once you identify one molecule and its properties, it's left for the pharma company which invests in research whether to give credit to ginger or take credit to themselves as a discovery. Because the molecule is going to get a different name anyway. So why would anyone want to associate it with where it came from? So this is what, from this point onwards, it gets the same molecule, maybe from ginger, pepper, jeera, hing, salt, we don't know. The same molecule which is available for free, in our household, may get a different chemical identity because it's been isolated and marketed differently. So this is the point from where the disconnect starts. And when the molecules are picked, they don't behave like the original herb from which they came from. Because in Ayurveda, we focus on extraction and concentration. We don't pick molecules. There is something known as the Samavaya Sambandha. Samavaya Sambandha is something which is undisturbed. It's an equilibrium which is created, and the end product is either a herb or seed or fruit or, this is what gives it a very unique identity. But the modern medicine believes in picking molecules, associating it with specific therapeutic values and reducing the dose from probably 1 gram to 1 milligram, like 1,000 times less. But it all comes with side effects, unknown side effects. We don't know after 5 years of use how it's going to behave in our body. So what happens? Some drug becomes a drug, and for 10 years it's in the population. Try it on 1 billion people for a decade and then ban it. So what happens? So this has been happening. This is going on and on. It's a never-ending process because there is a lot of money in it. Let's not go into the commercial aspects of it, but this is where Ayurveda, which is simple yet practical, becomes complicated and inaccessible, and it also is open to side effects because the molecules are separated out, which is not supposed to be done. So it has been aggressively researched upon and contributes significantly to the varied needs of present day lifestyle. What happens? We have drifted so far away from nature. The food is not fresh anymore. There are so many things which we have adapted in our today's lifestyles, which are far removed from nature. But can we go back to nature all the time? No. So Ayurveda does not, or Ayurveda also finds out enough remedial measures when you are out of that natural environment. What needs to be done to detoxify yourself on a regular basis and keep the body clean. This is known as Shodhana. This is something which will help us reduce or get away from the building up toxins in the body. I'll take you through that concept also. And today there are latest advancements in diagnostic methods, be it biochemical tests, be it radiological tests, and n number of different kinds of tests. All these diagnostic methods can be used to our advantage. You initiate a process of treatment in Ayurveda and keep tracking with either X-rays or blood tests. You can see the change. It reflects. Whatever we do, it doesn't go unnoticed. You can track it, trace it through the modern diagnostic methods. There's a method to analyze and understand what Ayurveda is doing on the system and how to track it using diagnostic methods. The patient feels better and you can also see the same reflecting on the reports. It's a win-win situation and it can be integrated in Ayurvedic practice. Are we familiar with the terms Vata, Pitta and Kapha? How many of us? Some? Yeah? What are they? Vata, Pitta and Kapha? See, the material universe is made of the Pancha Mahabhuta. Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jala and Prithvi. The 5 elements. And these 5 elements combine in a unique manner to form 3 distinct biological energies. And they carry with them the gunas, the qualities of these Mahabhutas. For example, the air element has the Rajoguna. The Prithvi or the earth element has Tamoguna. So, and Agni always have the Sattva. So these 3, Sattva, Raja and Tama, interlaced with the 5 elements, they combine in a unique manner to form the 3 biological energies known as Vata, Pitta and Kapha. Vata in our living system takes care of all the neurological and psychological activities. That is the link between mind and body. All the neurological and most of the hormonal activities and the psychological aspects are controlled by Vata. Vata controls the body through its 5 divisions. It has 5 distinct parts or 5 distinct departments through which it controls the body. We are familiar with the Pancha Prana, that is Prana, Udana, Samana, Vyana and Apana. Prana is the seat, it's in the cerebrum, Pranavatra Murdhagata. Murdha means head. So Prana is actually controlling all the activities of the central nervous system. Vyana is in the heart, Udana is in the lungs, and Samana Vayu is something which is controlling the peristaltic movement, the digestion, the separation of nutrition from the waste products, metabolic waste, and then comes Apana, which assists in all aspects of excretion of bowel and urine and reproductive fluid and also the fetus through the delivery process. So likewise, there are 5 aspects of Pitta, 5 aspects of Kapha. Pitta governs all the metabolic activities and digestion in our human system. Digestion at the digestive system level and digestion and metabolism at the cellular level.
That makes too much noise. Stop.
Why don't we turn on the central AC?
Yeah, can I really see?
Turn on the central AC.
Kada ka fan make noise.
Yeah, we'll put on the AC.
Okay. Very nice.
Close a window then.
So we were talking about Pitta. Pitta controls all the metabolic activity. It is Agni. Pitta is representative of Agni. Agni is something which transforms. All kinds of transformation. If the food has to translate into nutrition, if the food has to translate into energy, Agni supported by the Samana Vayu. It's like fire and oxygen, fanning the fire. They work in tandem. So Agni and Vayu together play a major role at the level of Samana Vayu. And Pachaka Pitta. There are again 5 kinds of Pitta, which are governing all the metabolic activities at the level of the digestive system and at the cellular level. Then comes Kapha. Kapha is a combination of Jala and Prithvi elements, the water and earth elements. It is necessary. Kapha governs all the immunological aspects of the body. Our body's immunity, the Kshama Guna. Kshama in the sense here Vyadhi Kshamatva. Vyadhi is the disease, and to counter the effects of the disease, the immune system is something which is responsible to keep the healthy process going. And this is the function of active, normal, healthy kapha. So, the structural aspects and immunological aspects are taken care by kapha. There are 5 kinds of kapha. You can see mucous membranes lining almost every part of the body. If we are exposed to dust or smoke or pollen or allergens, what happens? Immediately some mucus is formed. If we eat something spicy, what happens? Immediately mucoid saliva is formed. Why this is happening? The body is preventing the irritant from touching it by creating a mucus layer which traps it. And once trapped, it either gets digested or eliminated. This happens in the nose, this happens in the mouth, this happens everywhere. The white blood cells and their activities are something controlled by kapha system. So if this is the normal state, I am just giving an overview of what Vata, Pitta and Kapha do to the body. If this is the normal healthy state of activity of these 3 biological energies, what happens if they get deranged? All these elements are made of guna. We are aware of the concept of guna, qualities. The Pancha Mahabhutas have qualities. Vayu is dry, Jala is wet, Prithvi is Guru. Our food also is made of these gunas or qualities. We have something known as Vimshati guna. There are 20 qualities. It can be hot, cold, light, heavy. There are 20 gunas like that. These are known as biological gunas or Guruvadi gunas or Sharirika gunas. Starting from Sattva, Raja, Tama, the 5 elements, and 5 elements are made of qualities or gunas, and our body is also made of the same, and our food is also made of the same. So what happens? If there is excess of any of these gunas, these Vata or Pitta or Kapha or in combination starts getting deranged. Too much of the same kind, it's going to upset the equilibrium in the body. Then what happens? If Vata gets deranged, it leads to conditions which are of degenerative disorders in nature. Degenerative disorders are caused by aggravated Vata. This is at the level of body. At the level of mind, anxiety related disorders are created by Vata because Vayu has the Rajoguna. Rajas is always leading to hyperactivity or anxiety. Pitta is Agneya in nature, it is fiery in nature. If Pitta gets deranged, it becomes responsible for all the inflammatory disorders. Degenerative disorders because of Vata, inflammatory disorders because of Pitta, and autoimmune disorders because of Kapha. Immune system related disorders, which are today we have heard about the concept of, we are coming across the concept of autoimmune disorders, which is a huge area which is very, very challenging to the modern medicine. However, advanced it is, this is the greatest challenge they are facing, the autoimmune disorders. And touch upon that concept also. Now we have come across the Vata, Pitta, Kapha systems, what they do in their state of normalcy and what they create in the state of ill health. If Kapha exceeds, its impact on the mental plane would be towards depression, lethargy, laziness, mind-body slowdown. All these happens if Kapha is exceeding its normal state. Pitta is Sattva generally, but it can lead to inflammatory disorders. Vata, Rajoguna, it can lead to anxiety-based disorders. About Ayurveda. I said Ayurveda is a comprehensive system of healthcare. How is it comprehensive system of healthcare? It has its own materia medica, it has its own system of diagnosis, it has its own system of knowing the possibilities and limitations. This is something which is very, very well highlighted in all the Samhitas of Ayurveda. There are various Samhitas, the textbooks of Ayurveda, like Charaka Samhita, like the Sushruta Samhita for surgery, like the Kashyapa Samhita for pediatrics. Various textbooks of Ayurveda are there. Every textbook, every single textbook discusses the possibilities and limitations of treating any disorder. But unfortunately today we see in advertisements and misrepresentations that Ayurveda can cure anything. You can grow taller after 25 years. You can cure diabetes. You can cure hypertension. No. There are limitations. There is a timeline. There is a timeline before which conditions can be treated and cured, after which they can only be managed. So these possibilities and limitations are very clearly mentioned in the basic Samhitas. But today's practitioners tend to oversee that and get into the tall claims domain, and tall claims are going to give bad reputation to the science. Kaya Chikitsa, Kaya is the body. Kaya Chikitsa is the internal medicine department as we see of today. On to Bala Chikitsa or Kaumara Bhritya is one section of Ayurveda which deals with today's three departments like obstetrics, gynecology and pediatrics. They are so well interlaced, so it comes under one specialty. Graha Chikitsa is psychiatry. Psychiatric care and neuropsychology and neuropsychological treatment. Psychological and neurological systems, they coexist because, as I mentioned earlier, Vata is governing these two. The psychoneurological conditions are dealt with in the Graha Chikitsa. Shalakya Tantra is something that deals with ENT and ophthalmology. Shalya Tantra deals with surgery. The best known Samhita for Shalya Tantra or surgery in Ayurveda is the Sushruta Samhita. Acharya Sushruta from Kashi of today, he was the first person to write down the guidelines of surgery in his textbook known as the Sushruta Samhita. Here in this Samhita you will be amazed to know the extent of surgical knowledge that existed in India 3000 years ago. If Acharya wrote this textbook 3000 years ago, it should have been in existence for many more, at least hundreds of years. Okay? The principles of surgery, like the use of sharp instruments, blunt instruments like forceps. There are 107 varieties of blunt instruments. There are 25 varieties of sharp instruments which could slice a human hair vertically into two. Though gold was available, there was a special alloy of steel which was supposed to be used. All these are available now. All techniques, what we see, the suture techniques, the suture patterns, the needles, curved needles, triangular edged needles. Even today we don't see the triangular edged needles in use. Sushruta used it. There, surgery developed as war medicine in those times. Lot of broken bones, lot of spilt out intestines, cut out ears. There were endless number of conditions which required surgical attention. And Sushruta Samhita was the forerunner of the surgery-based Ayurveda. Then comes the Agada Tantra, toxicology. Poisons or toxins come to us through food, through water, through air, so many, through thoughts also. So there are so many ways by which the toxins enter the body. Agada is something which has, the Agada Tantra is one section which develops antitoxins. How to counter the effects of poisons. Because generally food, medicine and poison, they can play each other's roles. If you force feed someone 5 kilos of rice, he will die. Rice is food. And if medicine is wrongly used, it can turn into a poison. And poison in very small quantities may act as medicine. So they can play each other's roles. Depends on the intention and depends on the dosage. So toxicology is something which deals with different kinds of bites, like it can be snake bites, it can be insect bites, it can be poisoning through heavy metals, poisoning through minerals. So various combinations are dealt with under the Agada Tantra. Then comes the Jara Chikitsa or Rasayana Tantra. Today we see a new branch evolve known as the geriatrics. Though it was there in a nascent stage for quite long, today it is getting a lot of focus. Geriatrics is dealing with the elderly or old age related problems. Many of such conditions may not be or should not be, what Ayurveda says, should not be considered as diseases. It is the rule of life. Aging is the rule of life. Some things which the body does not keep up with the requirement. As we age, we don't produce the same fund of hormones or enzymes, or the body may not be able to absorb like it used to absorb the minerals and vitamins from our dietary sources. So what happens? You need to identify what is running low in the system and give supportive care. You need to supplement. Supplementation comes then when your body cannot produce any more of the required hormone or enzyme. But unfortunately today we see everyone popping in enzymes and pills and minerals, vitamins from the childhood. Excuse me. So wait till the body cannot produce any more of it. Then you start. Till then our dietary sources are sufficient to take care of all the nutrient requirements. And also today we are seeing geriatrics as something which requires to be implemented on a large scale. Elderly people are being neglected, more so in India. It is happening, and maybe it's happening elsewhere also. So geriatrics is something very relevant to take care of the elderly population and their nutritional and supportive care. Vajikarana is something which deals with reproductive sciences or conditions like infertility, conditions like low sperm count, conditions like if the conception is not happening, we need to understand what is wrong at what level and make up for the deficiencies. So these are the 8 branches of Ayurveda, 8 main branches. Again, there are many subdivisions. For an introductory session, this is something which I can give an overview. As I mentioned, compared to today's system of healthcare, where Ayurveda is doing better, there are 2 areas. One is the degenerative disorders and one is the autoimmune disorders. There are plenty of autoimmune disorders, be it a skin condition known as psoriasis, be it a condition of hypothyroidism, even cancers are being treated on lines of autoimmune disorders. So what happens? With time, the toxins start accumulating in the body. When the toxins are large enough, the tissue system, the human body, fires through immune response. These toxins are trapped and metabolized. But there is one situation where the toxins are accumulating in the body so discreetly that they do not immediately cause any disorder. It may be a discomfort which you may not be able to give it a name. You don't feel all that energetic by the end of the day, but you may start feeling normal. This is a kind of discomfort, but no, it can't be named as a disease. Energy levels going low, or not feeling hungry by meal time. I'll take you through that warning signs also. What happens? This toxin load goes on building up in the body, and when there is a tipping point, like when the body becomes weak, these toxins start settling down in the weaker tissues. Depending on where this weaker tissue exists, the disease is formed there. It is known as sthana samshraya. Before that, these toxins keep circulating all over the body, causing only discomfort. Later, they start settling down in the weaker organ or organ system and start creating a disease depending on where they are settled. And it results in inflammation and degeneration. Today, we also can come across one major new system or revival of the old concept, old in the sense 30-year-old concept known as psychoneuroimmunology. This is one branch which is generating so much interest. The psychological status is upsetting the neurological system, which will finally upset the immunological status. Psychoneuroimmunological pathways. We have decoded these pathways long ago. If you control the stress in the mind, then there is no question of accumulation of it, there is no question of stress converting into a disease and getting into complications. So this is the general pathway of tissue toxin response. But when these toxins, the simplest route of toxin accumulation is the digestion. If our digestion is bad, if our fooding habits are bad, these are sufficient to supply toxins into the bloodstream. So when the body becomes weak, the toxins become stronger. The conventional allopathic system of healthcare advocates immunosuppressive therapies. In autoimmune disorders, our immune system is going to get so strong and so hyperactive that immune system becomes responsible for tissue damage. So what the medical systems are advocating is suppress the immune system so that there is no large scale tissue damage. But suppressed immune system is leading to various different disorders. You can't shut down the security system. For example, if some terrorists have seeped into a public area, if the security systems have to fire at them, there will be collateral damage. But if you ask the security systems to be silent, the future will be more devastating than now. Because you can't recognize where the tissue ends and where toxin begins. And by the time immune system becomes active and alert, it is too late already. In contrast to what is happening, in Ayurveda, we have something known as the Panchakarma therapeutics, which is known as Shodhana or cleansing the system. It is a sequential process through which we loosen the tissue toxin bond. The toxins which have settled in the tissues, we can loosen it. And once the tissue and toxins are separated, there are methods by which we can flush them out of the system. And this is known as Shodhana or generally known as Panchakarma. Unfortunately, various kinds of oil treatments or massages are being passed off as Panchakarma. They are the preparatory phase for detoxification. The Panchakarma is either Vamana or Virechana or Vasti, Nasya, Rakta Mokshana. These are various techniques by which you create an exit route for the accumulated toxins. You can flush out the toxins which is accumulated over last 30 years, last 40 years. So once done, we are left with a weaker body. Because toxins in the first place settled down because body became weak. So once you strengthen the system, once you detoxify, you are left with the weaker body, and then you have to use the Rasayana Tantra and strengthen the system. Fine tune the immune status. That is real health. So this process is something totally contrasting with the concepts of what we see in today's immunosuppressive therapies. The simplest example for immunosuppression is the use of steroids. So sad, children of 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, 2 years, they are given steroidal inhalers, antibiotics. Once this antibiotic and steroid cycle starts, it's very difficult to break the cycle. Steroids suppress the immune system, suppressed immune system give break for some time.
No, stadium. Very well be going on.
Is that
We
okay?
could have question after that.
Half an hour.
We'll take a break and talk.
So, if we can avoid this entire gamut of steroid and antibiotic cycle, half the battle is won. Steroids and antibiotics create a parallel administration in the body. They don't allow the body to be alert enough and do its job. You are creating a parallel system which is disturbing the equilibrium. And this parallel administrative system is not sufficient in itself to take care of future needs of the body. That is why sometimes it looks like a life-saving, situation. But later, in the long run, the same things, the same conditions may become detrimental to life. So, how to manage? As I mentioned, there is a inverse relation. Initially, if this is something representing stress, and if this is something representing the mind-body complex. If this is either psychological stress or toxin buildup, and this is the mind-body complex. Initially, when the stress levels build up, the first phase of stress, the mind and body become very active. They become more alert. They become more productive, more competitive. All good things happen when the stress levels start building up, because you are in a fighting mode. And this is the peak performance level. You are taking stress head on and processing it to your advantage. And once you win over the stressful condition, it's a reward. That happiness what you get when you win over stressful situation is a reward. So till here, stress is building up, human mind and body complex is also becoming geared up to take that stress. Till here, it is all health. And then you have to support yourself with proper lifestyle and proper dietetics to be at the peak performance level. This is the smaller part of the timeline. And most of our previous generations in ancient ages, they almost were in this situation where stress is there. It was never zero stress. Stress was always there. It might have been financial stress, it might have been food security. There are so many things. Every family had 5, 6, 8 children. It's not easy what they went through. But there, if the lifestyle and dietetics were regulated, as we see yukta ahara viharasya. So if the diet and lifestyle, if the sleep and wakeful patterns, if whatever we do fall into a regulated pattern, that is sufficient to keep us healthy. Unfortunately, we neglect dietetic and lifestyle concepts and allow the stress to build up, and we don't have adequate methods to stay at this point. From this point onwards, you can see a inverse relation. Stronger the buildup of stress or toxins, weaker the mind-body complex becomes. And over a period of time, these precursors for diseases like stress or toxins don't remain toxins anymore. They convert into a tangible disease. You can give it a name. At a very late stage, here you can see it getting a name and a diagnosis. That is when you need good lifestyle, good dietetics and good medications. That's when for the first time you are going to see a doctor, because the body is not able to manage it by itself. This is where it is getting a little more complex. Initially only lifestyle changes was sufficient, then it becomes dietetics, then becomes lifestyle, dietetic and medications. Then a medical condition left unattended may turn into a surgical condition. Till here the reach of the Panchakarma. You can detoxify the system and pull it back in timeline. But if we have neglected it for a bit too long, what was curable easily becomes curable with effort, then it becomes just manageable. Diabetes and hypertension, we may not be able to cure it, but we will be able to manage it only. That's not a cure, but still you can manage it in controllable levels. In the large, it becomes a terminal condition or totally incurable, a hospice care. What happens? You cannot manage that condition with either lifestyle or dietetics or medication or surgery. It's crossed the timeline beyond repair. So end of life care, everything comes there in the timeline. and it has passed through various stages which gave us a chance to get back in the timeline. If we keep neglecting it, that's where we end. It may take 100 years for that, but this is the pathway. Some of the warning signs, as I mentioned: loss of appetite, persistent digestive disorders, irregular sleep patterns, changes in short-term and long-term memory, sluggishness at work, tremors or anxiety, loss of libido, loss of coordination in regular day-to-day activities. So these are some of the warning signs. So how to manage proper dietetics and proper lifestyle, as I mentioned. Dietetics is a huge, topic in itself. I have made some points which can be generalized, which can be applied to various time zones. Of course, we need to be more specific about which area requires what kind of diet. Food should be freshly prepared and warm. I am taking you through a number of points. See how much of it can be practically applied in your day-to-day dietetic aspects. Why should food be freshly prepared and warm? Freshly prepared food, which involves cooking or roasting or frying or steaming or any of these processing methods, are methods by which the food gets sterilized. No pathogens in the form of fungus or bacteria or virus or protozoan can exist beyond 100 degrees centigrade. And most of the cooking methods involve taking the food through this. Maybe for short time, maybe for long time, but food should be freshly prepared and warm. That is when it is most nutritious, it is most delicious and also healthy. Stale food builds up the tamasic bhava. Fresh foods support the sattvic. Then it should be nutritious. There are a lot of people going in for a zero fat diet, which is causing more harm than health. The right kind of fats, right kind of proteins, digestible proteins have to be used. In the name of high protein, very rich sources of protein has been consumed which we are unable to digest. For example, excess use of paneer, we will be unable to digest it. Excess use of soya, we will be unable to digest it. On the other end of the spectrum, you can see mung beans and peanuts, for example. This is just an example. They are not very rich in protein like the other sources, but they are very, very absorbable. You can eat and digest the mung based foods and it converts into required protein. But if you take paneer in excess, you are consuming protein but you are unable to digest it. It's known as the milk overload. We may not be able to drink and digest 2 liters of milk, but we can eat paneer made of 2 liters of milk in one meal. So there is a milk overload. Nothing of this matters if our digestive system is strong or we are physically extremely active and working out, or in the younger age group, these things can be digested. But later, when the digestive system becomes weak with time, these things are not digested well. Then comes eat only. Food should be taken in a proper quantity. What is a proper quantity? It's very difficult to quantify what is the proper quantity. If we mentally segregate our digestive capacity, the food, the capacity of intake into something, X number of units. There is a rule of 1/3 for solids, 1/3 for fluids. It can be lassi, it can be water, it can be soup, it can be patla dal. So 1/3 for solids, 1/3 for liquids, and leave the 1/3 empty, so that food is propelled well in the intestines and digestion is effortless. Do not take hot and cold foods in quick succession. This is very important. Our enzyme activity, which is a representative of Agni, works very well and it works in its optimum level only when the core temperature is 2 degrees higher than the body temperature, which is the general occurrence. But frozen foods, too much of frozen foods or too much of drinking cold water can dampen the effect of enzyme activity on the food, which may lead to indigestion. Eat in a pleasant atmosphere. Do not eat too hurriedly or too slowly. Chew thoroughly. We have a set of teeth only in the entrance to mechanically cut down food. Enzymes can act only on the surface area. They cannot penetrate deep into solid food. So how to increase the surface area? It is by chewing. When we chew thoroughly, sufficient saliva is formed. When sufficient saliva is formed, digestion is better. Because the saliva is alkaline and the next compartment is acidic. If you don't chew thoroughly, there is no sufficient alkaline matter to neutralize the acid in the next chamber. Gobble food, there is no alkaline material and it's only acid. And you can see more than half of the population popping in antacids and H2 blockers and so many. And the side effects of these acid blockers run into nearly 7 pages on WebMD. You can see they prevent the absorption of minerals, they prevent the absorption of vitamins, they prevent the absorption of components which are required to mature blood cells. Endless. It looks easy to pop a pill, but the long-term effects are disastrous. Do not eat too hurriedly or too slowly, as I mentioned. Concentrate on the food while eating. Food should be specific to the individual's body type. Ayurveda has methods to assess our body types. Each and every body type is unique. No two persons are similar. I may be short and stout yet healthy. You may be lean and tall and yet healthy. There are different representations of different combinations of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. They have their positive and negative sides, and that is the blueprint. We can't treat it. 45 minutes to 1 hour of good exercise daily, and then what remains is what we are intended to be, what we are designed to be. So someone who is by nature a Kapha Prakriti has to work for 2-3 hours to come into shape, and 1 week if you don't work out, you are back to what you were. Because we can't fight the Prakriti. Prakriti is the nature. That is how we were designed to be. And Vikriti is something, the deranged aspect of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which requires treatment. So we should not end up treating conditions which don't require treatment. Yeah? So food should be specific to individual body type and geographical origin. Here is where I am very inclined to give the example of India. The diet aspect, dietary practice of a coastal climate in India like Kerala is so contrasting to that of dietary components of what happens in Gujarat, what happens in Rajasthan. Similarly, what happens in Bengal. If it is a humid climate, hot and humid climate, you need some specific food habits. We have to develop some habits which are supportive to counter the effects of humidity on the system. Because of excessive humidity, as I see here, like in Bengal, the number of water sports are more, humidity is high, heat is high, it becomes something known as Anupadesha. Geographically, in the Vedic line of thought, there are divisions like Jangala, Anupa and Sadharana Desha. Jangala Desha is something like a desert-like climate which is hot and dry or cold and dry. Anupa Desha is wet, humid, it can be cold or hot. Anupa Desha is supportive to build-up of kapha. So, in Bengal, the mustard oil was being used as a traditional, cooking medium. And that is supposed to counter kapha very, very well. And in places like Rajasthan and Gujarat, It is so hot and dry. You need a lot of ghee and butter and milk to maintain normalcy. And in coastal climate, it's a very different thing. Food has to be light. More we move towards colder climates, stronger our digestive efficiencies become. More we move towards the equator, weaker our digestive efficiency becomes because we dissipate the body heat through sweat. More we move towards the poles, because of the cold, the heat is conserved and digestive system becomes efficient. That is where people can eat raw meat and digest also. Lot of cheese and digest also. All these concepts of specific dietetics according to geography is missing in today's calorie-based diet. If you give a full South Indian meal to a Punjabi, he may digest it in half an hour. A Punjabi thali to a South Indian like me, I may take 2 days to digest it. So that is the gross variation in how our digestive efficiencies are different according to our body type, our geographical origin and locally available foods. These specific dietetic patterns are yet to find a place in today's dietetics. They are missing. So this is something which, to reiterate, eat only when you feel you are hungry. That means 2 meals a day is ideal. Something like a 11 o'clock lunch and 6:30, 7 p.m. dinner. If both the meals are big enough, you don't need to munch on anything in the meanwhile. You don't feel hungry, you don't feel tired, you don't feel weak. 2 meals a day, if you can manage it, that would be the best option. Eat in accordance with your digestive efficiency. Don't weigh food. As I said, the 2/3 principle, where 1/3 for solid and fluids, 1/3 leave it empty. 2 meals a day is ideal, 1/3 the capacity. Don't eat till you are full, eat only to satisfy your hunger. Don't eat till you are full, because when you finish 2/3 of the capacity, that's when your hunger is gone, and that's when you feel trupti. Trupti is a satisfying feeling that you have got a meal. And don't overeat, because unlike animals which don't know whether their next meal time is certain or not, at least our next meal time is certain. We know we are going to have dinner if we are alive. Yeah? So the next meal time is not uncertain. So follow these principles as much as possible. Chew food thoroughly, again it's a reiteration. Drink water intermittently. Yes, again about drinking water, there has been a lot of misconception about when to drink water. It's difficult to generalize, but if someone is taking a wheat-based diet, if the diet is made of wheat, like breads and rotis and there water or lassi or soups or any fluids have to be sipped while eating, so that it doesn't become too pasty and it doesn't become too difficult to be propelled in the digestive system. If someone is taking a wheat-based diet, drink little water during a meal. It need not be water only, it can be soups, it can be lassi, you can make it tasty. And if it is a rice-based diet, no need to drink water before, during or after a meal, because it has sufficient water and it can get propelled into the intestines. Start every meal. We don't know our digestive efficiency, so the first pharmacy is the kitchen. Start every meal with chewing a few pieces of slightly salted fresh ginger. Just slice ginger into points, a little lemon and a little salt. Make a fresh pickle, chew it and start a meal. Do it within 2 meal times, you will see a very different digestive efficiency. It is by far the most effective and simple remedy to take care of indigestion and constipation. Chilies, red and green, they are more irritant and less digestive. Ginger and black pepper are more digestive and less irritant. They are more therapeutic. If possible, try to replace some of the green and red chilies to ginger and black pepper as much as possible. Strictly avoid stale foods. Stale foods, as I said, they don't give a lot of energy and they tend to give a tamasic bhava or give a sense of lethargy. So prepare food only so much so that you exhaust it within 12 hours. As much as possible, don't take cooked food back into the fridge. Uncooked stuff, raw vegetables, fresh fruits, milk, unboiled, all that can stay in the fridge, and prepare little quantity and exhaust it. Managing time is difficult, I understand, but let us also understand what the body can digest and what it can't. So as much as possible, freshly prepared food is the best option. Eat indigenous and seasonal foods. It is very difficult nowadays because of large scale cold storages. All kinds of foods are available everywhere. We don't know what is geographically grown or seasonal foods. Everything is distorted, but as much as possible, if there are some things which can be grown locally grown foods which are seasonal would be most efficient for giving us energy. And plus, when it comes to rice, if you are a rice-based, if you follow a rice-based diet, 1 year old rice is very, very light for digestion. If the rice is 1 year old, old grains are easy to digest. Old grains have low glycemic index. Old grains, old rice, when you cook it, gives out very less of starch. So the sugar overload is not there when the grains are old. Develop a method to preserve grains for 1 year. Previously, there was a granary in each and every house. So these granaries were serving two purposes. One, the grains were getting older and lighter for digestion. Two, there was food security. Drought or floods or whatever, you have grains there for 1 year. So old grains are lighter for digestion because they are having a lower glycemic index. This, as far as practically possible, if you can store the grains for some time before it is used for food. Then in our day-to-day life, we can't plan, we can't be organized 100%. At least 80% of planning can be done. Because so many things happen spontaneously, you have to decide then and there. You cannot. Nowadays we are pushed to the extent of taking decisions over phone calls. Previously we used to have some time to say yes or no, think and get back. But nowadays largely we are pushing our abilities to take decisions within a phone call. So it is a little stressful. We don't know the long-term effects of that next 20 years, what's going to happen on that. So waking up in the Brahmi Muhurta. Waking up as close to sunrise as possible is the second best. Brahmi Muhurta, like the devotees do, 3:30 a.m. is the best. Second best is waking up as close to sunrise as possible. First thing is attend to natural urges. Pass urine and stool. That should be the first thing you do after waking up. Why I mention this is, today we see small children going to school very early. Neither they realize the importance of answering to natural urges, nor parents insist they spend 15-20 minutes in the toilet before they brush their teeth and start their bath. So attending to natural urges is a sign of health. If it is happening normally, that is an indication of all the systems are functioning properly. Then comes oral hygiene. Oral hygiene means 3 or 4 components to it. Brushing the teeth, scraping the tongue. Many people don't scrape the tongue. Just develop a habit of using a copper tongue cleaner to scrape the tongue. There is a layer of dirt on that. Just scrape it when you brush your teeth. Massaging the gums with Triphala and honey combination. Then swishing sesame oil within the mouth. This strengthens the gums and this will flush out the toxins or microbes which are either fungal or bacterial or viral or protozoal in nature. Oil swishing is a very important tool. Simple. Use sesame oil. Some devotees are using groundnut oil. Sesame oil is a better option for showing this effect.
What about coconut oil?
Coconut oil is good. Sesame oil is stronger in effect on the gums. Some devotees are using coconut oil as of now, as I know. Sesame oil is more penetrative and sharp. It flushes out the toxins more efficiently. Then, as I mentioned, scraping the tongue. Why scrape the tongue? Many people don't do that. There is a layer of dirt masking the taste buds. The food we eat is not in direct contact with the taste buds. So we can't appreciate the food completely. What happens? You need more salt, more sugar, more spices to appreciate the food if there is a layer of dirt masking the taste buds. So scraping the tongue will leave you with a situation where too little of salt, too little of spices are sufficient to enjoy the delicious nature of food. It's like clearing a veil when we see something. Clarity is there in the appreciation of food and taste through the taste buds. Then comes Ushadpan. If someone is having a tendency for constipation, 2 glasses of warm water is what is recommended to keep the bowel movement normal. If not, 2 glasses of plain water as the first thing in the day, especially if it is kept in copper glass, would be more antimicrobial in nature. Copper is supposed to give a lot of energy to body. Then comes yoga or vyayam. Depending on our body types, we can choose various levels of exertions. Yogasanas can give most of the benefits of exercise with little exertion. Then comes endurance activities. It can be brisk walking, it can be running, it can be swimming, badminton, cycling. You can choose various degrees of exertion. 45 minutes to 1 hour of daily physical exercise. Then comes Abhyanga. Use sesame oil for massage. Once a week at least. For the body you can use sesame oil, and for the head you can use coconut oil for massage. Soak in it for 45 minutes and take a warm shower. So this is something known as Abhyanga, which is extremely efficient in de-stressing the body. Snana is the bath. Water should not be too hot for the head, and water should be hot, that is warm for the body. It should not be very hot when you take head. Then comes, after snana, the meditation or pranayama. Then food habits, as I mentioned. Ratri Charya is about sleep patterns. We need anywhere between 5 to 8 hours of continuous undisturbed sleep. 5 to 8 hours depending on body types. The Vata individuals require only 5 hours of sleep and they are recharged, and the Kapha types require 8 hours, and that's what is necessary. If it is less in Kapha types and more in Vata, it may not be supported. Avoid day sleep as much as possible, because sleeping during the daytime leads to fluid retention. Fluid retention in the body leads to many more disorders. So as much as possible, avoid day sleep. Sleep should be 5 to 8 hours of continuous nightly sleep. It should be in night, it should be continuous. These are some points by which we can take care of our health. There are many more. These are some things which can be easily and practically followed. I can, if there is a email group, I can email the slides. All the slides are not self-explanatory, but I have spoken about it. On YouTube, similar lectures are uploaded. You can refer to the recording. Okay, super. So, whatever I mentioned, it requires, see, there are so many guidelines how to follow all. We may not be able to follow all, but it's like a situation where in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself says to Arjuna, Arjuna says, you are giving so many instructions, how do I follow? I'm not able to keep track. He says, Krishna says, Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam. The mind is definitely, fickle and it may not be able to focus all the time. Abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena cha grihhyate. Abhyasena tu kaunteya. Through abhyasa, through the art of abhyasa, that is learning through a cultivation of disciplined action.
Sheila, we can, he's got about 15 minutes, we can continue? Okay. Doc, you can go ahead if you want.
So through the twin pillars of Abhyasa and Vairagya, Abhyasa is the art of learning which needs to be learned through cultivation of disciplined action. This involves long, zealous and calm and persevering effort. Vairagya is once you know something which is not supportive to your wellness, then start avoiding it. There may be various addictions which may not be intentional, like coffee. People talk about coffee as good or bad, or there are some articles which have demonized it, some articles which have glorified it. Coffee and tea and chocolate, they are stimulants by nature. So you make use of it. In the first half of the day, if you take a cup of it, maybe your your level of alertness goes up. You can be more alert during work. Try to avoid coffee or tea in the second half of the day. So make use of it for your advantage. But if someone is addicted to coffee through the day, that requires correction. So through Abhyasa and Vairagya, most of the principles of diet and lifestyle can be followed. This is much before the system goes into a domain of ill health. When we are healthy, it is easy to follow some things to remain healthy. And these are some of the points through which we can do that. Some of the case studies through which we have treated ankylosing spondylitis is an autoimmune disorder, which is a crippling condition of autoimmune nature and inflammatory nature, which alters the alignment of lumbosacral spine, and this has no known treatment in the allopathic system of healthcare except long-term high degree of steroidal use. But through Shodhana Panchakarma, over a period of 6 weeks, we could change the alignment of the spinal vertebral column and the paraspinal muscles, and after 5 months of follow-up, you can see a very normal curvature in the spine. So these are some of the case studies only. As I mentioned, some inflammatory disorders, degenerative disorders and autoimmune disorders. Here is a case of hepatitis C infection with grade 2 fibrosis in one of our devotees itself. So hepatitis C, generally an interferon therapy is initiated in the allopathic system. Here we have used some simple Ayurvedic herbs alongside the main medicine, which is Kala Jeera or Kalonji or Nigella seeds, which is a kitchen remedy, which is a source for which is a concentrated source for interferon, which is antiviral therapy. It can be initiated at home. This took about 5 to 6 months of taking Kala Jeera powder, and when we repeat the scan, we see no evidence of fibrosis. Reversing liver cirrhosis is near impossible. In such a condition, this has happened with remedies as simple as Kala Jeera. Cerebrovascular accidents, cerebral strokes, and treated well, the recovery is very good. If not treated in time, within 1 year, the chances of recovery is good. Between 1 and 2 years, the chances of recovery, total recovery reduces. Beyond 3 years, just we have to keep the muscle tone and muscle bulk going. This is the limitation and possibilities of something known as something like cerebral stroke. And here I would want to finish this talk on introducing you to Ayurveda, Yoga and Vedic dietetics. Though it was intended to give an overview of these concepts, let us, if you have any questions, I would want to answer it. And Mukunda Prabhu is going to take you through the facility which I am representing today. It is Sanjeeva Ayurveda in the Vedic village. So, any questions I would want to take? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for the lecture, first of all. Ayurveda is very specific, so how do you apply it to the whole family? Let's see, we have a family of 3, and one person has a predominant Vata, one person has a predominant Pitta, and another has a predominant Kapha, so they are all different spectrums.
Yes.
So how do you balance cooking so all the all the doshas are
See,
satisfied.
Generally, regular the dietary guidelines which I gave, and I will also email you a dietary guideline which is a little more elaborate, which will suit all body types without disturbing either vata or pitta or kapha. Only when you find the derangement, that is when you need to avoid or add or delete from this basic dietetics. If I can make a email list, I will send you the elaborated version of this guidelines. That is sufficient to, you can follow that. All body types can have it without conflicting with any kind. Okay? Something like using brown rice, something like using ghee and sesame oil in some combination that will balance all the three, vata, pitta and kapha. And using barley, for example. This is something which will neutralize the effect of either building vata or pitta or kapha. So there are some options by which a very balanced diet can be evolved. Once you know the basics, you can make the foodstuffs. I am not getting into a diet chart, half roti, quarter katori of this and that. No one is going to follow that. Once you know the guidelines, if you want to use wheat for making bread, 1 kilo of wheat, 1000 grams of wheat and 350 grams of barley. If you blend this becomes a high fiber diet which is suitable for all body types. So guidelines like this I have elaborated. I will email you.
I was wondering how to assess yourself to see, which dosas are out of balance in your system.
First, when you feel virtually healthy, do an assessment of your body type. There are various charts available on the net. I can give you a link. Simple, questionnaire. You arrive at your prakriti. And if there is derangement, you can see what kinds of symptoms are developing because of the derangement. You will arrive at either vata or pitta or kapha. There can't be a fourth entity unless it is trauma. Trauma is beyond, the bodily diseases come with vata, pitta and kapha. The external factors like trauma, if you fall or if you have an accident, if you get hurt, that trauma is first and then comes the role of vata, pitta, kapha there. So I will give you the links to assess body types first, and then when it deranges, you can identify these symptoms. Okay? And there are simple methods to do that. Yes.
In America now, there's a lot of people who do raw food, blended raw vegetables, and they seem to have good results. How does Ayurveda looks at raw food as against cooked food?
Ayurveda recommends a judicial combination of raw foods and cooked foods. Cooked foods are converting raw foods into a more digestible, product. Basically, I can put it as cooked and uncooked foods. Instead of raw foods, I will put it as cooked and uncooked foods. Raw vegetables, if you cook it, you are artificially ripening it through spices and salt and using of heat and making it more digestible. In the process, you will lose vitamins, but you won't lose minerals. You won't lose the elements like iron or copper. You can't kill iron or copper with heat. They remain. What you lose is the vitamins. What Ayurveda says is, again, in today's scenario, you have to keep one more thing in mind. Raw foods are not sterilized. Foods are exposed. While vegetables are grown, they are exposed to a lot of pesticides. However thoroughly you wash, it may not go. So there are two ends of spectrum. Cooked foods are having an advantage of being sterile and light for digestion. Raw foods have an advantage of being rich with vitamins. So a judicial combination has to be there. About 20% of raw foods or 30% of raw foods and 70% of cooked foods is a good combination. And uncooked foods, try to limit it to more of fruits. Ayurveda does not say no to raw foods, it says yes, but not too much of it, because in naturopathic institutions we see when they advocate too much of raw foods over a period of 15-20 days, detoxification does happen, but it upsets the digestive system beyond a point, which requires again treatment and use of cooked foods to treat those conditions. So what is the point? So 20 to 30% of raw foods and 70 to 80% of cooked foods would be a judicious combination. Fruits again can be taken at any point of time. Fruits come with their own enzymes, but only you have to chew them thoroughly before you gulp it. Drinking fruit juices is not as good as eating fruits, because fruits get digested when you chew. Saliva is the digesting component there. So if you do not get fresh fruits to eat, fruit juices can be sipped so slowly that almost at the speed of eating a fruit, so that saliva is produced and digestion happens. So about raw and cooked foods, 20 and 80 is a good combination, and don't overdo raw foods, because today we see a term goitrogens. If you just Google, you will get goitrogens. Common foods which when taken uncooked are going to suppress the thyroid functioning. If the thyroid functioning is suppressed, it leads to a series of problems. Even cholesterol levels build up with suppressed thyroid. These goitrogens are foods of like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, peanuts, mustard. All these foods are suppressing the thyroid function in their raw state. When you cook them, they don't have this negative effect on the thyroid functioning anymore. These are known as goitrogens. This is one alarming thing what we see, like too much of raw foods can suppress the thyroid function. So that is the reason Ayurveda always advocated a combination of both of these, 80-20 or maximum 70-30.
What kind of drink or what kind of food which is like energy boosters, like sportsmen and they all drink this Gatorade and stuff. So how can we?
See, there are, in foods, if your digestion is good and if you include pomegranate, amalaki, raisins on a daily basis, that gives sufficient energy. If not, the next step is going for medicines like herbs like ashwagandha, like shatavari. So these are simple herbs which give a lot of energy.
Like sportsmen on the ground, they are feeling exhausted.
They use steroidal components are also used in that. We need not perform to that level. We only need energy to run our day-to-day activities. So ashwagandha, brahmi and amalaki, these are good antioxidants. They are good energy boosters. Raisins and dates, they are also full of energy. You can use things like this.
But these raisins and dates can be used by diabetes patients?
See again, fructose digests differently compared to glucose, and moreover the refined sugar. They have all may be sweet, but they have different effects on the net effect is different when you take honey, when you take white sugar, when you take glucose, when you eat fruits. All of these don't convert into high sugar levels immediately. That is why a little fruits are permitted. Even honey, soon it will come out with flying colors. It has very little effect on the circulating glucose levels. Because it has more of fructose and not sucrose like the refined white sugar. Refined white sugar is something where the body is not recognizing the sugar, it's not pushing it into the bloodstream, and it is pooling up in the blood and causing an artificial kind of diabetes. It is not that, and in these cases, you can see once people stop eating white sugar, their sugar levels from 400 can drop to normals. Depends on the sensitivity. Still, I would suggest brown sugar or unrefined sugar or honey. Good is the best form of it. Has minerals also.
Learning these things is very encouraging, it's very inspiring. So how is it that we can continue our education in this Ayurveda as well as addressing cultural habits of food eating that we've inherited and how do we change those? You know,
We have to bring a gradual change, don't change anything abruptly. Gradual change, but you have to see what are the local eating habits, what are seasonal foods, what are the geographical aspects. And I can guide you, we can make an email group or we can make a Facebook group for, US. I have initiated that process. Once we are all in the group, we can discuss, one question of yours, when I can analyze and get back to you, many more people benefit from that. So it is possible, it's not impossible.
Very good.
So I'll pass it on to Mukunda Prabhu. He will take you through the facility, what we have to offer in India for the Panchakarma Shodhana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
He's been there. Mukunda Prabhu has been there. He's done the course of therapy.
So part of what inspired me to get involved with this whole project was that, as some of you may know, I was living in Mayapur for a year, and I was doing a lot of youth service, serving my room. I was just like, from the morning till the evening, I was just constantly doing things, and I kind of inherited, or I got some mercy of getting these boils in my body. So I was getting boils, and it was like a chronic thing. I just one after the other. I tried steroids, I tried so many things, until finally I was just like, you know what? I need to do like a treatment for my body. I need to treat my body. Like, my body needs some attention. So what I ended up doing is I ended up visiting Dr. Pradyumna, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, is that he's a senior consultant at this Sanjeevan Ayurvedic Medical Spa, and also the Sanjeevan Vedic Village, which is an hour and 20 minutes from Calcutta. Which, if I had known that before, I probably would have flown in, took out into this place, got some treatment, and then continued my service. Because what ended up happening is, anyways, I got all these boils, and so finally, at the very end of my trip, I took treatment from Dr. Pradyumna, and I didn't get another boil. And that for me was like, it was just like, whatever you want, I'm here. I'm here. So I'm working at a clinic part-time in physical therapy. I'm also doing other projects, so I'm taking my time to help Dr. Pradyumna and his endeavors, and also to share his knowledge. As you can see, he's very well versed in the Vedic text and in his knowledge in Ayurveda. So as part of this, and as part of what's also helping him come here, is we're also representing the resort where he does his treatments. And it also might be a good spot for, if you're doing a transit to Mayapur or to India, you have somewhere to land, regenerate, and move forward in your, we have jet lag, we have these different things that goes on here. So, the Sanjeevan's mission is to heal the sick, rejuvenate the well, and educate both to maintain a healthy body, mind, and spirit through the application of ancient sciences of Ayurveda and yoga. Some of the things that I want to incorporate in my lifestyle were already implemented here, like morning meditation, morning breakfast, things like that. They all incorporate that into the place. So if you want to incorporate that into your lifestyle, they have a teacher there who can teach you some pranayam. You also see the doctor first when you first arrive, and then you get a nice plan of what you're going to do, where you're at, and how to improve from there. I had a very high pitta, stress, boil, inflammation, and so to reduce that was important, and also to help me, fight off this infection, because it's actually an infection, it's a bacterial infection that kind of goes into the blood. So that's really how you started. So a typical day you do, it's in like a big farm of like 600 acres. So me and Jahnavi, we'd go and do little walks around. It's outside of Calcutta, so I don't know if anyone been to Calcutta before? Okay, so when I say Calcutta, you're like, oh my god. But no, it is very far away from Calcutta. It's secluded. It's a very beautiful property. They even have a Sita Ram temple not too far. It's a nice chapel walk you can do. Actually, when we were walking, we were wondering wow, if we had a house, we would like these palm trees like that and this and that. So the infrastructure is they use particular how do you say, architecture to promote sattva. Like they use straw huts on the top. There's this mud kind of, it's very natural looking. So you don't feel like you're like in a very nice resort, but at the same time you are. It's a very clean place. You know, the staff is well trained. And if you experience India where customer service isn't a priority, this definitely is one there. Like here is definitely a priority. So this is kind of the thing when we did there. We do a morning walk. We do some, the nice breakfast. We'll get the consultation in the morning afterwards. We'd have either a massage treatment after that and after like some digestion or before the lunch, depending on which we were getting. We took our first therapy in the morning before lunch. Anyway, so that all will vary depending on whatever you're working on. But this is kind of like an overlay. And I'll go ahead and email this to Prabhuji so he has an idea what it is. They all use fresh herbs, everything there. You see, it's very, very therapeutic. I mean, dealing with teenagers, I don't know, I'm sure most of you have kids, sometimes be very difficult. So I felt like for this, the first time I got Shirodada, this was actually my first, this is not me obviously, but the first time I got it was at there, and I really got to feel a nice peace of mind, a nice relaxing therapy. This therapy is actually when they use poultices of different herbs and rice bran, and they massage it throughout the nadis and throughout the body, and it really helps your body absorb these nutrients. This is another therapy that they do there. They do a nice panchakarma treatment there. It was the first time I ever had two people massage me at the same time. I was like, oh Krishna. It's like, you have to just surrender. You have to just surrender. But at the same time, I kept feeling guilty, like why, like maybe I shouldn't deserve this. But then, my family was just like, Mookie, you need this. Like, you need to get this treatment. Like you're not healthy. And this is part of the, so you have a combination of like, you're serving your body, you're helping you, continue your service, but at the same time, you're getting a very like relaxing experience, and so this is, when you get the doctor, he'll do a pulse diagnosis. Today there are some consultations. We have one more opening, by the way, from 2 to 2:30.
I take it.
Got it.
That was great.
So he'll kind of get you, a nice consultation before and after you leave, which was really nice. Some more photos. Beautiful property, beautiful. The yoga room was really nice, overlooking a nice pond. When we were there, it was only us two, so we really felt like we had the whole place to ourselves. But then after we left, the whole group of people came, like 20, 30 people. Here are some techniques that they use, that they encourage as you're going on there. It kind of gives you an example of how you can flush the body out and really kind of, feel rejuvenated. Like when I left Mayapur and I came back, some of the devotees were like, whoa, you're glowing. Like you look like a complete different person. And I'm not making this up. Like literally, devotees were just like, wow, you don't look anything like you did when you left. And I really feel like I have all to thanks to Dr. Prajuna and also to Sanjeevani, because when I came back, I really felt rejuvenated. I really did. They'll teach you some yoga. Like the yoga class that we attended was a very basic yoga. So if you kind of feel intimidated, like, well, yoga's not really my thing, we did literally like maybe 5 or 6 asanas. And it was just very relaxing. Like it was mainly breath work, and for me, that's part of a big component to what asana is about. So that is also a very wonderful experience. Here's some devotees doing the classes there. As you can see, devotees from all over the world stop here and they see the doctor. They take some time to kind of rehabilitate and also rejuvenate their body. The food there is, spectacular. I really couldn't, like, it was for me, it was the nicest place I've ever been in my life. Like, I was just like, oh my God, this place is so opulent, it's so beautiful. And for me, it's like, it's worth it. Like, you don't, like, to invest money into your body is it is real wealth. It's really like what I have to, in my life, incorporate more of. Like some of my friends, they separate aside a little bit of budget for their health. And I definitely am going to make an effort to make this part of my daily routine to get back into India, because with the biological timing, you know, and the whole, you know, your whole day gets shifted to a whole different time zone. Sometimes it's not hard, it's really hard to transition into that new time zone. So this is definitely like something that is going to be part of our, me and, you know, Janavi's routine, and that is taking some time to focus on our health, rejuvenate, and then we can go and do our service and do pilgrimage properly in the proper health conditions. And that's basically what I am, me personally, am encouraging all you to do. That if you do decide to go to India, or you just decide to do a Panchakarma treatment, you can spend, you know, up to $4,000 in the United States doing it here, when you can pay half of that and do it at a beautiful resort and a beautiful place like Sanjeevani and Vedic Village. Then, I mean, this is just a little bit of what it looks like inside. I mean, really clean, very paka. And I think that also helps. Imagine doing therapy in a very like dirty place. It's not fun. It's not fun at all. And this is the kind of the huts that I was talking about. It's very beautiful. There's the scenery. You really feel like you're in the jungle, and I think that's also very conducive for healing, because you're in a very relaxed environment. So as you can see, it's first class. It's really, really nice.
You need the mosquito net or the decoration?
No, this is probably more of like a decoration. Because they're all AC, and stuff, and it's included in there. And they have a pool. You can do some I did some aqua therapy when I was there. I was having some knee problems, so I did some little therapy in there myself. This is the buffet area. This is where we had lunch back there on a Sunday brunch, and this Bengali man would come and sing Radha Krishna melodies from back in the day, you know, with this little instrument. It was so far out. So this is the main dining hall. This is where, and as you can see here, it has beautiful huts. So it's just like a very, very relaxing and very beautiful
Is the menu
experience.
all Ayurvedic?
Pardon?
Do they prescribe you menu items according to your dosha?
Well, that's what the first day you go there when you see the doctor. Before we even ate, we went to go see Dr. Pradyumna, and we're like, okay, what do we eat? What can we not eat? And I think that that's going to be assessed and given to you before you go into the area.
But is it all vegetarian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think there are some, they do come with onions and garlic, but there's some items that you can order without onions and garlic. Because I mean, personally what I did is I ate very simple. I ate very khichdi and like some salad and some like very light when I was there. But you have an array to choose from. So that again is depending on what he suggests from you. And there are certain things where you can order specialty items and things like that. So if he does give you a very particular diet, then you can go and the packages that we got, the package that we did was it included our meals, it included our accommodation, it included the therapies together. So it was just like, I don't know, just like a very nice combination of what we needed. And then again, I already like to eat kind of simple anyway, so I just try to go for the simple. The thing is, like, this place, you know, unfortunately, Ayurveda isn't like the biggest thing, and everyone doesn't want to like do Ayurveda, unfortunately, which I don't know why. So like, they do have to kind of like incorporate some kind of media, some kind of like, you know, like they have a bowling alley, for example. Like, that's not Ayurvedic, but they try to tailor to that whole population. So that way more people can come and get interested and take treatment and get more knowledge, because that's really what it is. So they have to kind of mask it so people can take in Ayurveda, at the same time can take in some spiritual benefit as well. So here's kind of the grounds. This is when you drive in. Oops. When you drive in, this is the reception. When you walk in, very beautiful. The pool is right behind this area. And this is the waiting area. There's Wi-Fi in there. There's Wi-Fi throughout the rooms. I mean, really, it's just a cool place, to be honest with you. So right now, this is kind of how we're doing. Unfortunately, we're all booked up in Alachua. So, and it's just an idea in the future when we come back. We're going to be making appointments. We'll have consultations to give you a prescription. As soon as he gives you the prescription, that'll be mailed to the Sanjeeva Resort. And then that'll go ahead and they'll send you a message to your email address saying, we received your medication. Now we're gonna send it to you. So after that happens, the medicines are packed and then shipped. And then, you know, of course, we're very open. We're just straight up like 15 or 10% markup on all of the products that we're giving you. So it's not like, as you can see, we're not here to like be rich or get millionaires. And then you're looking at about, for a 2 month supply with shipping, is probably gonna be around $100. And that's just for the medicines. When I came, I spent like 150, but it was for me and Genevieve. But that was for a 2 month, you know, 2 months of every single day, 2 different herbs. So that's what you're looking into. I'm just trying to give you a projection. Here we go. Let's see.
How much is the consultation?
The consultations are $30, and they run between 25 to 30 minutes. So this is another thing. If you place the order, the price will be confirmed within 72 hours. The credit card, you can take the credit card information to this number. I'll run this over through all the people who are getting consultations, and then once it's been shipped, it should take about 3 to 4 weeks to get here from the date of the order. So, and we're trying to shorten that time. We're working our best, but there's just India here. It just takes time, and I mean we can get it to you faster, but then that'll increase the price. So this is like a very standard kind of protocol of what to expect. So then here, this is the package that we did. We did a 3-day, and this is different packages. And as you can see, it's fair. Seeing the resort, seeing where you're staying, and getting the treatments. You're getting twice a day of treatment. And you know, I had a Shirodara like once. I mean, in America, in Alachua, there's an Ayurvedic place. I won't say their name, or no, not in Alachua, in Gainesville, and they charge $400 for one Shirodara treatment. So as you can see here, that one Shirodara is covered just with a 3-day pass. So it's something to think about and to budget. I'm gonna hand out some flyers and the contact information if you guys have any questions. I'd like to give a big thanks to Sanjeevan because you know they're helping the doctor get here. Like they helped him. You know, they're helping him kind of promote his Ayurveda. But at the same time, they're getting something out of it, which is this advertising thing here. So it was a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I hope that you can all benefit from this and take it to further your health. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me after the presentation or ask Dr. Prajuna. Now I guess it's Prashadam?
Yes.
Prashadam, and then doctors, your first consultations at 1 o'clock. Any questions?
Consultation I have already booked or I can...
Can I squeeze into? Please.
Sure. I'll have after we get out after Prashadam or during Prashadam, we can just meet with me and I'll see what available slots we have.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.